Thanks very much, Graham. Yeah, I sort of slipped in behind you, so apologies for that too. Good morning. And first of all, opening, I'd like to thank the Executive Secretary General, Ambassador Vimont, and indeed the European External Action Service for the opportunity to address the opening session of this high-level conference on managing complex international crises. I'd also like to apologize again for my slight arrival delay. What was going to be a challenged timeline became even more challenged before taking off when the pilot announced that there was fog in Brussels this morning. I understand that actually it was probably quite clear, so they obviously got their early warning a little bit wrong. So apologies again on that. But I am very grateful for the opportunity to speak. I mean, for many of you, will be familiar with WFP, and those who are will know that what we share, how we share it, and with whom we share information during a crisis really is at the center of our work. So I really am pleased to be able to share some of WFP's specific views on early warning preparedness and the information that we share, and just to show that whilst we might have got the early warning part of the fog wrong this morning, we certainly had the preparedness part right, because we had Tony Craig here ready to jump in, and Tony is obviously very conversant with the subject matter, and I'm sure would have been a more than excellent substitute had I not made it. But I'm delighted to be here. WFP and our mission, I mean, very clear, our mission is to end hunger, and our work really does mean that the role of information in early warning and such in crisis is fundamental. You might ask, what is the real relevance of an invitation to WFP to a meeting on managing complex international crises, especially when the subheading is towards a global network of crisis rooms. And Antonio, my note actually has a question mark, so I don't know if they were reading your mind when they put that there, but I would say that the answer is fairly simple. We know that having enough food to eat is intrinsically and intimately linked to a nation's stability. And people who lack adequate food and access to nutrition, but also to the physical, social, and economic aspects of their life that allow them that, really become food insecure. And we also know that food insecurity often occurs amongst people who are experiencing violent conflict and live in extreme poverty. And it's sometimes difficult to work out where the chicken and egg situation there. Is it the complex insecurity and poverty driving food insecurity, or is it the food insecurity driving it the other way? Whichever, what is clear is it soon becomes a vicious cycle. And this whole vicious cycle of it really results in the instability that characterizes many of the complex crises that we work within today. In fact, there are cases in which governments have been toppled as a result of food insecurity. And in most crises, issues related to food security, agricultural, natural resources, climate change, all of these become part of the prolonged nature of complex emergency situations. So, I think the answer then to the relevance of our presence here is quite straightforward. But the problems that we face and the answers to those problems are not so straightforward. And many of the speakers before me have referred to the intertwined, complex, multidimensional nature of the crises that we all have to work within. And that is why we need to partner. And it's particularly important why we need to share information amongst all of us as partners. Now, many European institutions, particularly ECHO and EuropeAid, are very significant partners of the World Food Programme, and we're pleased that this is extending into other areas, such as the External Action Service. And of course, many of the member states of the Union and many of the agencies and organizations represented here today are strong partners and supporters of the World Food Programme. Now, our operations center, which was formerly called our sit room or situation room, but we refer to it now as an operations center, which is part, we hope, of this global network, has actually had long-standing partnerships with networks and crisis rooms in Europe, including what is now referred to as the ECHO, or the European Emergency Response Coordination Center. And we really find that an excellent body. An interesting point, I think, for us historically is that back in 2007, WFP actually hosted a much smaller scale event than this, but back in 2007, we actually hosted a meeting of crisis rooms of multilateral entities, and some of you are in the room today representing those bodies who are there. But what is really, I think, exciting is to see how that sort of membership and network has grown over the years. And Antonio was saying that up to 400 practitioners invited to this conference today, which is hugely, hugely important. So as I move forward with these remarks, I'd like to focus on three areas, just highlight 3 points. And I'd like to focus on evidence, what I will refer to as speed bumps, and trust. First, the evidence. For quite a while now, WFP has effectively worked within the international humanitarian community's early warning reporting system. And we have devoted a lot of resources to this, and together with UNICEF, we are the co-chairs of the Interagency Standing Committee, the IASC's sub-working group on preparedness, which as of next year will become preparedness and resilience, linking those two very important aspects. So we've put a lot of direct resources into this reporting system precisely because of the threats to food security, such as drought, floods, etc., do manifest themselves with early warning signs. So having a good early warning mechanism is hugely important to many of the food security crisis situations that we can work towards. Now, over the past few years, that we've been doing for quite some time, but more recently, we've extended our experience and our analysis into what might be referred to as socio-political risks. And they are now actually, quite honestly, as important, if not more important, than to just be monitoring the early warning of weather systems. But for us, as a sort of like information sharing and having this as a true information system reporting, etc., it's relatively new terrain. And so we are finding our way a bit here. But we have also started linking both our weather early warning mechanisms, which we've had some time, but also the socio-political aspects of it into suggested early actions, which is where we have our preparedness and early response linked very much with early warnings. And it's, I think, really important to have those two elements, those two sides, I would argue, of the same coin, very closely linked. And it is really important that we all commit resources to those two sides, the warning side of this, but also the preparation for response. And that really means we need a lot of information to make this work. We need that information from the field, the theaters of operation eventually, and also elsewhere. Now, we have a very deep field presence, and it's very extensive, but we're acutely aware that even with that presence, even with that on the ground information, we have to be very clear on how we partner with others, and it's not optional. If you want to have the full context of a situation, you have to be able to share information and put a complete picture together. And we have developed this already with several early warning systems within member states, but also with other institutions, and many of them here within the European Union and Commission. We've also worked very much within our interagency role to ensure that the early warning information that we have, as I've said, is not only leading towards the response, but actually to raise awareness of what the eventual costs of responding are going to be. Because one could argue that with our early warning systems that we have in place, with the information that has helped us develop the appropriate response, we've actually got a really clear vision on what we're going to do. However, without funding to enact that clear vision, the vision very rapidly becomes a hallucination. And we've seen that happen several times. So so that information that we give out, we also need to have people acutely aware on how the responses will have to eventually be funded. And information sharing, I think, can help immensely with that. Secondly, let me turn to what I referred to as speed bumps. Now, many will refer to the problems related to sharing information as obstacles or barriers. I actually think, and I would prefer to think of them as speed bumps. In other words, proceed, maybe with a bit of caution, but proceed. Because it's going to be very important that with a little bit of careful driving, that we are able to negotiate these speed bumps. And these speed bumps can actually occur sometimes just from a culture of sensitivity or even over-sensitivity. Now, at this point, I can't help but be reminded of an anecdote. This is a true story. I am not going to name the country within which it happened, nor the people or organizations, agencies who were involved. But a humanitarian worker working in a fairly complex situation where there was also military interventions and military operations underway, shared the information of all their locations, distribution points, and everything with all the geographic coordinates with the military to ensure safety. Great, said the military. Great, said the humanitarian worker, who jumped back in his vehicle and started driving away, and then suddenly recalled that he'd forgot to keep a copy of the information that he had just given. So he fairly quickly went back and said, could I get a copy? Unfortunately, it had now been stamped secret, top, bottom, left, right, and he couldn't get his own copy back. That is a true story. So I think we have to be very conscious of what we will classify, how we classify it. We really need to make sure that, there are certain things we all understand that can't be available, but we have to make sure that certain information is available. Often some of the stuff that's being classified, you can actually get better information if you just use Google Earth and, zoom in. You can actually get it easier there, and there are softwares, packages, and analysts available who have this. So I think it's important that as actors in the same sphere, we learn how to come together. But, as I said, accepting that there need to be speed bumps. So, because, if you actually get down to what it all boils down to, is that fundamentally, if we're not all working together, if we're not all sharing this information, we're losing opportunities to assist those who need our help, we're wasting time, and above all, we're wasting money, funding that actually could turn the vision or stop the vision from becoming a hallucination. So this is not just because it's a nice thing to do. It's fundamentally critical to how we can all work together to be ready to respond. So now to my final point, which was trust. And trust really does build through regular interaction and sharing. And it can at times be highly personal, which is why, in fact, events such as this conference help develop and build the overall architecture of trust collectively together. And Ambassador Vimont, you referred to that in your opening, that this is about developing those relationships and sharing. In WFP, we've extensively adapted crisis management simulations as one of the ways in which we build trust. When you actually go through simulation exercises, you put people under a certain amount of stress, but it actually encourages interaction because the fact that it is a simulation makes it less contentious, and relationships can be built in those exercises. And that is actually something that we're using now within our own sphere with the partners that we work with, increasingly with what are referred to as national disaster management authorities in many of the countries within which we work. And we're also doing this at subnational levels. We ran one recently in Kenya as in a preparation for potential violence following the elections. So this time we were ready. Fortunately, there wasn't the sort of reaction that there was last time. But having learnt the lesson last time, this time we ran the exercises to have build up those relationships and trust. And I think really for all of us working this way, national disaster management authorities are acutely important because they are the ones where we really need to retain this information. And the Deputy Minister mentioned within the Asian region the context within which that exists. And we have some excellent relationships with many of the ASEAN countries where this is, it really is very, very well developed. So, in closing, let me just close with an observation. We need clear and strong messages that say that sharing information is the automatic position. That is the starting point. It is where we begin. We share information during crisis. We share information to help develop early warning systems. We share information so that we can be better prepared. But this sharing of information is not just a technical issue. It's not a process. It's an act of leadership. And that setting the position to automatic, sharing information is the automatic position, it needs to come from the top, and it needs true leadership to show it. And I believe that will does exist within the leaders of today. So once again, thank you very much for the invitation extended to us by the External Action Service. And we are very happy to be here participating and look forward to discussions at the round tables and indeed anything else that may follow here. Thank you.
Amir, Abdullah.